Marcus Rodriguez strutted through the crowded gym like he owned the place. His championship belt gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he made his way to the main ring. At 28, he had never lost a professional fight, and his arrogance grew with each victory. The other boxers moved aside when he passed, some out of respect, others out of fear. The gym fell silent as Marcus climbed into the ring for his daily training session. His coach, Tony Mendez, shook his head as he watched his fighter's theatrical entrance. Marcus had talent, but his attitude was becoming a problem. Sponsors were starting to complain about his behavior outside the ring, and the media was growing tired of his boastful interviews. As Marcus began his warm-up routine, the gym door opened with a soft chime. A woman in her early 30s walked in, carrying a small gym bag. She was of average height with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she moved with quiet confidence as she surveyed the equipment. Sarah had recently moved to the city for a new job as a software engineer. She had been looking for a gym to continue her fitness routine and had heard good things about this place. What most people didn't know about Sarah was that she had been practicing martial arts since she was 7 years old. Her father, a former military officer, had insisted she learn to defend herself. Marcus noticed Sarah immediately and smirked. He loved having an audience, especially when it included attractive women who might be impressed by his skills. He began throwing more powerful punches at the heavy bag, making sure each impact echoed through the gym. His training partners rolled their eyes, knowing exactly what Marcus was doing. Sarah paid no attention to the show-off in the ring. She had seen his type before, men who thought muscles and loud voices made them superior. She quietly began stretching near the free weights, focusing on her own routine. This lack of attention irritated Marcus more than he cared to admit. After finishing his bag work, Marcus jumped down from the ring and approached the bench where Sarah was preparing for her workout. His friends and training partners watched nervously, knowing that look in his eyes. When Marcus felt ignored or disrespected, he often did something stupid. "Hey there, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false charm. "You new around here? This isn't really a place for delicate flowers like yourself. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of those yoga studios down the street." Sarah looked up from lacing her shoes and met his gaze steadily. "I'm fine here, thanks," she replied calmly, not taking the bait. She had dealt with condescending men her entire career in tech, and this boxer was no different from the others. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment as several people nearby chuckled at Sarah's dismissive response. His pride couldn't handle being brushed off so casually, especially in front of his home crowd. He decided to escalate the situation, not knowing he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. "Listen, lady," Marcus said, his voice getting louder. "I'm trying to be nice here, but if you want to play tough, maybe you should step in the ring and see what real fighting looks like. Unless you're too scared, of course." The entire gym went quiet. Even the sound of weights clanking stopped as everyone turned to watch the confrontation. Tony Mendez started walking over, sensing trouble, but he was too far away to intervene quickly. Sarah stood up slowly, her expression unchanged. She was tired of men like Marcus who thought they could intimidate women with threats and challenges. In her 20 years of martial arts training, she had learned that the loudest fighters were often the least skilled. "Are you actually challenging me to a fight?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but carrying clearly through the silent gym. "Because if you are, I accept." Marcus blinked in surprise, not expecting Sarah to accept his challenge. He had assumed she would back down or leave the gym embarrassed. Now he found himself in an awkward position. He couldn't back down without looking weak in front of everyone, but fighting a woman would make him look like a bully. The other gym members began gathering around, sensing drama unfolding. Some pulled out their phones, knowing this moment would end up on social media regardless of the outcome. Tony Mendez finally reached them, his face showing concern and frustration. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Tony whispered urgently. "Think about your reputation, your sponsors." This is insane, but Marcus was too proud to listen. He had painted himself into a corner with his big mouth, and his ego wouldn't let him escape gracefully. "Fine," he said, trying to sound confident. "But don't blame me when you get hurt. I'll go easy on you, sweetheart." Sarah almost smiled at his condescending tone. She had heard similar words from countless sparring partners over the years, right before she taught them humility. "I appreciate the concern," she said dryly, "but I can take care of myself." The crowd grew larger as word spread through the gym. Even people from the street began peeking through the windows, drawn by the commotion. Marcus felt the weight of all those eyes on him and knew he was committed now. His reputation as an unbeatable fighter was on the line. Tony tried one more time to talk sense into his fighter. "Marcus, this is not worth it. You have a title defense coming up in 2 months. Don't risk everything for your ego." Marcus waved off his coach's concerns. In his mind, this would be a quick demonstration of his superiority. He would land a few light punches, the woman would realize she was outmatched, and everyone would remember why he was champion. What could possibly go wrong? Sarah began removing her jacket, revealing a simple tank top and athletic pants. Her movements were fluid and controlled, showing none of the nervousness Marcus expected. She had fought in dozens of tournaments over the years, facing opponents much more skilled than this arrogant boxer. As they prepared to enter the ring, Marcus continued his trash talk, playing to the crowd. "I hope you have good health insurance, lady. Boxing isn't like those aerobics classes you're probably used to." The spectators were divided in their reactions. Some laughed at Marcus's jokes, while others felt uncomfortable watching him pick on what appeared to be an ordinary woman. A few of the female gym members were actively rooting for Sarah, tired of Marcus's sexist comments and behavior. Sarah said nothing as she climbed through the ropes. She was using this time to observe Marcus's movements, noting how he favored his left hand and how his footwork showed small inefficiencies. Her years of training had taught her to analyze opponents quickly and find their weaknesses. Marcus entered the ring with his usual fanfare, raising his arms to acknowledge the crowd's mixed reactions. He was still playing to his audience, not taking the situation seriously. In his mind, this was entertainment, not a real fight. Tony reluctantly provided gloves for both fighters, still hoping someone would come to their senses and call off this spectacle. He had seen enough fights to know that anything could happen once the bell rang, and he was worried about the potential consequences for everyone involved. As they touched gloves in the center of the ring, Marcus leaned close to Sarah and whispered, "Last chance to quit before you embarrass yourself." His breath smelled of protein powder and overconfidence. Sarah looked directly into his eyes and spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "The only person who's going to be embarrassed tonight is you." Her voice carried a certainty that made Marcus pause for just a moment before his arrogance reasserted itself. The referee, one of the gym's trainers, reluctantly agreed to oversee the match. He hoped it would end quickly with minimal damage to anyone's pride or body. The crowd pressed closer to the ring, phones recording every moment of what was about to become the most talked-about fight in the gym's history. The bell rang with a sharp metallic sound that cut through the tension in the air. Marcus immediately moved forward with his typical aggressive style, throwing a series of jabs meant more to intimidate than actually hurt Sarah. He was still playing, up his role as the dominant fighter for the cameras. Sarah moved backward gracefully, easily avoiding Marcus's lazy punches. Her footwork was smooth and efficient, showing years of training that Marcus completely failed to recognize. She kept her guard up and her eyes focused on his center mass, reading his body language for telegraphed attacks. The crowd murmured as they watched Sarah's defensive movement. Several experienced fighters in the audience began to notice something different about her stance and footwork. She wasn't moving like an amateur who had wandered into the wrong place. Marcus grew frustrated with Sarah's evasive tactics and decided to end things quickly. He threw a harder right cross, putting more power behind it, while still holding back enough to avoid seriously injuring what he assumed was an untrained woman. It was exactly the opening Sarah had been waiting for. As Marcus's punch came toward her, Sarah stepped to the side with perfect timing and grabbed his extended arm. Using his own momentum against him, she executed a beautiful hip throw that sent the champion boxer flying through the air before landing hard on his back in the center of the ring. The gym erupted in shocked gasps and surprised cheers. Marcus lay on the canvas for a moment, more stunned by what had just happened than actually hurt. He had never been thrown like that in his life, and his brain struggled to process how a random woman had just tossed him around like a rag doll. Sarah stood calmly over him, not pressing her advantage but simply waiting to see what he would do next. Her expression remained neutral, showing neither aggression nor satisfaction at having embarrassed the champion. She had simply responded to his attack with appropriate technique. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. The crowd's reaction told him that his reputation had just taken a serious hit. He could hear people laughing and making comments about the mighty champion being thrown by a woman half his size. "Lucky shot," Marcus muttered, though even he didn't believe his own words. He had felt the skill and precision behind that throw, and a cold realization was starting to creep into his mind that he might be in real trouble. Tony called out from ringside, "Marcus, just stop this now, you've made your point." But his fighter was too embarrassed and angry to listen to reason. The champion's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride made men do dangerous things. Sarah could see the change in Marcus's demeanor. The playful arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine anger and frustration. She knew from experience that angry fighters made mistakes, but they also became more dangerous and unpredictable. Marcus came at her again, this time with real intent to hurt her. His punches were faster and carried serious power behind them. He was no longer treating this as a show, but as a fight for his reputation and masculinity. Sarah adjusted her strategy accordingly. She continued to move and evade, but now she was looking for opportunities to counterattack. Her years of sparring against larger, stronger opponents had taught her exactly how to handle men like Marcus. The crowd sensed the change in atmosphere as well. What had started as an entertaining spectacle was now becoming a real fight with real consequences. The laughter died away, replaced by intense focus on the action in the ring. As Marcus threw, a wild haymaker trying to end the fight with one powerful blow, Sarah ducked under it and drove her elbow into his ribs. The impact was precise and painful, causing Marcus to stumble sideways and clutch his side. The sound of the blow echoed through the suddenly silent gym. For the first time since entering the ring, Marcus felt genuine fear. This woman wasn't just lucky or defensive. She was skilled, experienced, and now she was fighting back with techniques he had never encountered before. He was beginning to realize he had challenged someone completely out of his league. Sarah maintained her distance, watching Marcus struggle with both physical pain and the psychological impact of being outclassed by someone he had tried to humiliate. The fight was far from over, but the momentum had clearly shifted in a direction no one in the gym had expected when this confrontation began. Marcus circled Sarah warily now, all traces of his earlier cockiness gone. The elbow to his ribs had been a wake-up call that this was no ordinary woman. His breathing was heavier, and sweat was beginning to form on his forehead despite the fight being only a few minutes old. Sarah remained calm and centered, her breathing steady and controlled. She had been in this position many times before, facing an opponent who finally understood they were in a real fight. The difference was that most of her previous opponents had shown her respect from the beginning. The crowd pressed closer to the ring, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Phone cameras captured every moment as the story unfolded in real time. Several people were already uploading videos to social media with captions about the arrogant champion getting his comeuppance. Marcus tried a different approach, attempting to use his reach advantage to keep Sarah at a distance with his jab. But Sarah had fought taller opponents her entire career and knew exactly how to deal with this strategy. She bobbed and weaved, getting inside his range before he could react. Once in close, Sarah demonstrated why her martial arts background made her so dangerous. She landed a series of quick strikes to Marcus's body, punches, elbows, and knee strikes that targeted specific pressure points and nerve clusters. Each impact was calculated for maximum effect with minimal telegraphing. Marcus tried to clinch with Sarah, hoping to use his weight advantage to tire her out or throw her off balance. But Sarah was an expert in close-quarters combat, and she used his attempt to clinch against him. She trapped his arms and delivered several devastating uppercuts to his solar plexus. The champion boxer staggered backward, gasping for air and clutching his midsection. The precision strikes had knocked the wind out of him, and his legs felt unsteady for the first time in his professional career. The crowd's murmur grew louder as they realized Marcus was in serious trouble. Tony frantically called out coaching advice from ringside, but his words seemed to bounce off his fighter uselessly. Marcus was operating on pure instinct now, his technical training abandoned in favor of desperate survival mode. Nothing in his boxing career had prepared him for this type of opponent. Sarah could see that Marcus was hurt and disoriented, but she didn't press her advantage aggressively. Her martial arts training had taught her discipline and control. She waited for him to make the next move, ready to respond appropriately to whatever he attempted. Marcus's anger reached a boiling point as he realized how badly he was losing. In a moment of pure rage and desperation, he dropped his boxing stance entirely and rushed at Sarah like a street fighter, trying to tackle her to the ground where he hoped his size advantage might help him. It was exactly the wrong move against someone with Sarah's background. As Marcus charged forward with his head down, Sarah stepped to the side and caught him with a perfect knee strike to his chin. The impact was clean and devastating, stopping his forward momentum instantly. Marcus's legs turned to jelly as he stumbled forward, his vision blurry and his balance completely gone. The crowd gasped as they watched the undefeated champion wobble around the ring like a drunk person, clearly hurt and disoriented from the knee strike. Sarah backed away, giving Marcus space to recover while keeping her guard up in case he tried another desperate attack. She could see that the fight was effectively over. Marcus was too hurt and confused to continue safely, even if his pride wouldn't let him quit. The referee stepped in closer, watching Marcus carefully to see if he could continue. The champion was trying to shake off the effects of the knee strike, but his movements were slow and uncoordinated. His legendary boxing skills had completely abandoned him. Tony climbed onto the ring apron, ready to throw in the towel if his fighter couldn't recover quickly. He had seen enough head trauma in his career to know when someone was seriously hurt. Marcus's reputation was already destroyed. There was no point in letting him take more damage. The gym fell silent except for Marcus's heavy breathing and the sound of Sarah's light footsteps as she maintained her distance. Everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The night an unknown woman dismantled one of the city's most famous fighters. Marcus looked up at Sarah through glazed eyes, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. He had challenged someone who possessed skills he couldn't even comprehend, much less counter. The humiliation was complete, but the fight wasn't quite over yet. Marcus struggled to regain his composure, shaking his head to clear the fog from the devastating knee strike. His pride refused to let him quit, even though every instinct told him he was outmatched. The champion boxer had never backed down from a fight in his life, and he wasn't about to start now, regardless of the consequences. Sarah recognized the look in his eyes, the dangerous combination of hurt pride and stubborn determination that made wounded fighters unpredictable. She had seen it before in sparring partners who refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. These were often the moments when people got seriously injured. The crowd sensed the tension building as Marcus steadied himself against the ropes. Some spectators called out for the fight to be stopped, recognizing that the champion was clearly outclassed and hurt. Others urged Marcus to quit while he still had his dignity intact, though most of that was already gone. Tony made eye contact with Sarah from outside the ring, his expression pleading. He mouthed the words, "Please don't hurt him," while holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. The veteran trainer could see that his fighter was too proud to quit and too hurt to continue safely. Sarah nodded slightly to Tony, understanding his concern. She had no desire to seriously injure Marcus despite his arrogant behavior and insulting comments. Her goal had always been to teach him a lesson in respect, not to end his career or send him to the hospital. Marcus pushed off from the ropes and advanced on Sarah one more time, but his movements were slow and telegraphed. The earlier strikes had taken a serious toll on his coordination and reaction time. What he thought was a determined final assault looked more like a wounded animal stumbling toward its fate. Sarah waited until Marcus was close enough, then executed a textbook takedown that swept his legs and brought him to the canvas with minimal force. She could have hurt him badly in that moment, but instead she controlled his descent and pinned him gently to the mat. The position Sarah chose was both dominant and merciful. She had Marcus completely controlled, demonstrating her superiority without causing additional damage. Her knee was across his chest and her hands controlled his arms, making it impossible for him to move or continue fighting. "Do you yield?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice calm and professional. She wasn't gloating or celebrating. She was simply asking if Marcus was ready to acknowledge what everyone in the gym already knew. The fight was over, and she had won decisively. Marcus lay on his back staring up at the gym lights and trying to process what had just happened to him. His entire worldview had been shattered in the space of a few minutes. Everything he thought he knew about fighting, about himself and about women had been turned upside down. The crowd remained silent, waiting to see how this unprecedented situation would resolve itself. Phones continued recording as the undefeated champion boxer lay pinned beneath a woman who had walked into the gym less than an hour earlier as a complete unknown. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I yield." The words seemed to physically pain him to say, but Sarah could see the relief in his eyes as well. His ordeal was finally over, and he could stop pretending he had any chance of winning. Sarah immediately released him and stood up, offering her hand to help Marcus to his feet. It was a gesture of respect and sportsmanship that surprised many people in the crowd who expected her to gloat over her victory or humiliate him further. Marcus hesitated for a moment before accepting her help, allowing Sarah to pull him up to a sitting position. His body ached in places he didn't know could hurt, and his ego was completely shattered. But as he looked into Sarah's eyes, he saw no malice or cruelty, only the calm professionalism of a skilled fighter. The referee officially called an end to the match, though everyone present had known it was over long before Marcus verbally submitted. The crowd began to disperse, but many people lingered to talk about what they had just witnessed. Tony climbed into the ring to check on his fighter, bringing a towel and water bottle. Marcus sat in the corner, still dazed and trying to understand how his attempt to humiliate an innocent woman had backfired so completely. His reputation as an unbeatable champion was in ruins. Sarah began removing her gloves, ready to return to the quiet workout she had originally planned. She showed no signs of being affected by the intense confrontation or the crowd's attention. For her, this had been just another sparring session against an overconfident opponent. As the initial shock wore off, people began approaching Sarah with questions about her background and training. Word was already spreading beyond the gym about the unknown woman who had defeated the city's most famous boxer. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. News of the fight spread through social media like wildfire. Within hours, videos of Marcus's defeat were being shared across every platform imaginable. The hashtags arrogant boxer and unexpected champion began trending as people around the world watched the unknown woman systematically dismantle the boastful fighter. Sarah tried to return to her normal routine, but reporters and fight promoters were already tracking her down. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, sponsorship offers, and challenges from other fighters who wanted to test themselves against the mystery woman who had shocked the combat sports world. Marcus's life took a very different turn. The videos of his humiliating defeat played on sports news channels repeatedly, with commentators analyzing every moment of his downfall. His sponsors began canceling contracts within 24 hours, and his upcoming title defense was postponed indefinitely while the Boxing Commission investigated the incident. The gym where the fight took place became a tourist attraction overnight. People came from across the city to see where the famous bout had occurred, and membership applications poured in from women who wanted to train at the place where Sarah had made her stand against sexist behavior. Tony found himself fielding calls from journalists wanting to know how his undefeated champion had been so thoroughly outclassed by an amateur. The veteran trainer struggled to explain what he had witnessed, admitting that Sarah's skills were unlike anything he had seen in decades of boxing. Sarah's background slowly came to light as investigative reporters dug into her past. They discovered her extensive martial arts training, her competition history, and her quiet dedication to self-defense advocacy. What had seemed like a random encounter was revealed to be a collision between an arrogant bully and someone uniquely qualified to teach him humility. The story resonated far beyond the world of combat sports. Women's rights advocates praised Sarah for standing up to Marcus's sexist behavior, while anti-bullying organizations used the incident as an example of how bullies often target the wrong people and face unexpected consequences. Marcus spent several days in seclusion, avoiding the media attention, and trying to salvage what remained of his career. His agent worked overtime to control the narrative, but the videos spoke for themselves. The once mighty champion had been thoroughly dominated by someone he had tried to humiliate. When Marcus finally emerged for a press conference, he looked like a different person. Gone was the cocky swagger and boastful demeanor that had defined his public persona. He sat quietly at the podium, his eyes downcast as reporters peppered him with questions about his defeat. "I made a mistake," Marcus admitted to the assembled media. "I let my ego get the better of me, and I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. Sarah Chen is clearly a skilled fighter, and I underestimated her completely. I have no excuse for my behavior." The apology was genuine, but came too late to save his reputation. Sponsors had already moved on, fans had lost respect for him, and other fighters saw him as vulnerable. The aura of invincibility that had carried him through his career was gone forever, destroyed in a few minutes of viral video footage. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Fight promoters offered her professional contracts, reality TV shows wanted to feature her story, and martial arts schools across the country invited her to teach seminars. The quiet software engineer had become an overnight celebrity. Despite all the attention, Sarah remained focused on her original goals. She accepted a few carefully selected opportunities to promote women's self-defense training, but turned down most of the commercial offers. Her victory over Marcus had been about standing up for herself, not about becoming famous. The incident sparked nationwide conversations about sexism in sports, the importance of self-defense training for women, and the dangers of toxic masculinity. Sarah's calm professionalism in the face of Marcus's aggression became a model for how to handle bullies and sexist behavior. Marcus's boxing career never fully recovered from the incident. He continued fighting for a few more years but never regained his championship or his confidence. The memory of being dominated by Sarah haunted him in every subsequent fight, making him hesitant and defensive in ways that skilled opponents exploited ruthlessly. The gym where it all happened installed a plaque commemorating the fight, not to celebrate Marcus's humiliation, but to remind all members about the importance of respect and humility in combat sports. The incident became part of the gym's culture, with new members learning about the night when arrogance met its match. Years later, both Marcus and Sarah would reflect on that evening as a turning point in their lives. For Marcus, it was the moment his world came crashing down due to his own poor choices. For Sarah, it was the beginning of an unexpected journey as an advocate for women's empowerment and self-defense education. 5 years after the infamous gym encounter, both Sarah and Marcus had settled into very different lives than either had imagined that night. The viral video that had changed everything continued to resurface periodically on social media, reminding the world of the moment when arrogance met its match in the most unexpected way. Sarah had parlayed her unwanted fame into something meaningful and lasting. She founded a non-profit organization dedicated to teaching self-defense to women and girls, with a particular focus on building confidence and situational awareness. Her approach emphasized that fighting should always be a last resort, but when it became necessary, proper training could save lives. The organization grew rapidly, supported by donations from people inspired by Sarah's story and her measured response to fame. She developed a curriculum that combined practical self-defense techniques with lessons about de-escalation, recognizing dangerous situations, and building the mental strength to stand up to bullies and predators. Marcus had taken a much harder path to redemption. After his boxing career effectively ended, he struggled with depression and anger over how quickly his world had collapsed. It took him 2 years of therapy and soul-searching to understand how his behavior had created his own downfall. Eventually, Marcus found work as a youth counselor at a community center, specifically helping young men deal with anger management and toxic masculinity. His personal experience with the consequences of arrogance and disrespect made him uniquely qualified to guide others away from the same mistakes. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that Marcus now spent his days teaching boys about respect and humility, while Sarah taught girls and women how to defend themselves against men like Marcus used to be. Their paths had diverged dramatically from that night in the gym, but both were working to prevent similar situations from occurring. Tony, the veteran boxing trainer, had become something of a philosopher about the incident. He often told new fighters the story of Marcus and Sarah as a cautionary tale about the importance of character over pure skill. "Talent without respect is just a recipe for disaster," he would say, "and you never know who you might be underestimating." The gym itself had transformed as well. The incident had attracted many female members who appreciated the management's zero-tolerance policy for harassment and discrimination that had been implemented after Marcus's behavior. The culture shifted dramatically, becoming more welcoming and inclusive while maintaining its reputation for serious training. On the 5th anniversary of their encounter, Sarah received an unexpected message. Marcus had reached out through her nonprofit's website, asking if they could meet to talk. He explained that he had been working on making amends as part of his ongoing therapy and wanted to apologize properly for his behavior that night. They met at a quiet coffee shop. Far from the chaos of gyms or media attention, Marcus looked older and humbler, his demeanor completely transformed from the arrogant champion Sarah had faced years earlier. He had lost weight, gained gray hair, and carried himself with the careful posture of someone who had learned hard lessons about life. "I know my apology can't undo what I did or how I behaved," Marcus said quietly, staring into his coffee cup. "But I wanted you to know that defeating me that night probably saved my life. I was heading down a dark path of entitlement and disrespect that would have destroyed me eventually." Sarah listened carefully, seeing genuine remorse and growth in the man across from her. She had long since moved past any anger about the incident, understanding that Marcus's behavior had been about his own insecurities, rather than anything she had done wrong. "I'm glad you were able to learn from it," Sarah replied. "That's really all any of us can do with our mistakes. Try to become better people and help others avoid the same problems." They talked for over an hour, sharing what they had learned from their unexpected encounter and how it had shaped their lives. Marcus was particularly interested in Sarah's work with young women, admitting that he wished someone had taught his younger self about respecting women and managing his ego. When they parted ways, both felt a sense of closure that had been missing for 5 years. Marcus returned to his work with troubled youth, carrying Sarah's forgiveness as motivation to continue helping others. Sarah went back to her training programs, reinforced in her belief that even the most difficult situations could lead to positive change. The story of their fight continued to inspire people around the world, but now it carried an additional message about redemption, growth, and the possibility of learning from our worst moments. Sometimes the most important victories happen long after the final bell rings, in the quiet work of becoming better human beings.